Remember when we were talking about Biden and him gaslighting you? This is the fucking definition of gaslighting. Bitcoin, the problem with Bitcoin is lack of transparency and lack of financial inclusion. Their shitcoin. So they're saying fiat is more inclusive and fiat is more transparent? So, another country made Bitcoin legal tender. We're at two. We have El Salvador, we have the Central African Republic, and we also have Panama, right? But it's not official legal tender. In my opinion, it's better that way because the Panamanian government doesn't force people to use Bitcoin. It's all voluntary, right? So we got three countries so far. And of course, for some reason, the IMF, this is Bloomberg, right? One of the most well-respected legacy, traditional finance outlets, right? And for some reason, every time a country makes Bitcoin legal tender, some reason the IMF's opinion really matters what a sovereign country is doing. Anyways, Bitcoin adoption by Central African Republic, a concern, IMF says. We reported this came out May 4th. The Central African Republic's adoption of Bitcoin as legal tender presents a series of challenges for the country and the region, the International Monetary Fund said. The adoption of Bitcoin as legal tender in the Central African Republic raises more legal transparency and economic policy challenges. They always say those really big words, but they never explain it. IMF staff are assisting the regional and Central African Republic authorities in addressing the concerns posed by the new law. So check this out, okay? Because this is a lot more ridiculous than you think. A sovereign country passes a law and Bitcoin becomes legal tender in that country, and the IMF is saying that it's working with authorities to do what exactly? Anyways, it's not only the IMF. The World Bank has a problem with the Central African Republic's decision. This came out recently, May 25th. The World Bank is also concerned about a plan by the Central African Republic to set up a crypto hub after it became the world's second country to adopt Bitcoin, citing lack of transparency and the effect the move may have on financial inclusion. Remember when we were talking about Biden and him gaslighting you? This is the fucking definition of gaslighting. Bitcoin, the problem with Bitcoin is lack of transparency and lack of financial inclusion. Their shitcoin. So they're saying fiat is more inclusive and fiat is more transparent? Anyways, the Bank of Central African States, which sets monetary policy for 6 countries in the region, said it wasn't aware and pushed back against the plan. Again, apparently the central bank should have a say on what a country's laws should be and should not be. The last part before I get your guys' thoughts, to quote the World Bank, it is important that the relevant regional institutions such as the central bank and the banking authorities are fully consulted and remain in the driver's seat. There's something that we always talk about on this show about how Bitcoin shines the light of truth on everything. And here it is, one of Bitcoin's least known unintended features, or maybe it was intended, doing its thing, revealing the scheme. Maybe it's not really these countries calling their own shots, because it looks like to me, based on their wording on those very legitimate publications, also known as Bloomberg, they apparently have a very big problem about what the Central African Republic is doing with their currency. And with the World Bank, exactly, to quote the article, they want to be consulted every time the Central African Republic wants to pass a law. Holy shit, are these people fucking crazy? Those are my thoughts. Francis, is your blood boiling as much as mine?
So the IMF has its own shitcoin. I don't know if you guys knew that. If I was to say what is the biggest competitor or the biggest market that Bitcoin has to gain, it is international settlement, right? Large international transfers between petroleum companies, governments, and all of that, international reserve asset. And the IMF has a shitcoin that does just this, called the SDR, the special drawing rights. So when a country wants money from the IMF, which will loan it to them, and the special drawing rights, just so people are aware, it's kind of like a stable coin, an algorithmic stable coin that's composed of fiat currency. So it's like the worst of fiat. Basically, it's like, think of all the worst things about fiat. It's like, well, just take a bunch of fiats, stick them in another fiat, and then that fiat is controlled by an international government, and that we will loan you our shitcoin fiat that competes with, you know, our member states as currencies and with Bitcoin. And in exchange, you have to basically do whatever the fuck we say. That is exactly what the SDR is. So the IMF is just protecting its market, right? Because it preys on vulnerable countries like shitcoiners prey on vulnerable, desperate people that need the money. You can make 10x. You can get this free SDR money, which you will be able to spend at a central bank near you. So they're just a salesman, you know, selling their own alternative to that. I think there's three things that governments can do, like three good policies. It's just in general, just only three. There's one of them is Bitcoin legal tender. The other one is remove all KYC AML and disband all KYC AML enforcing agencies. Without this, the, you know, legal tender thing is, you know, it's lacking a little punch. And I can't remember. Oh yeah, and then prevent banks from shutting down the accounts of Bitcoin companies, because that is the biggest hurdle to becoming a successful Bitcoin entrepreneur. And most of the Bitcoin entrepreneurs, and that is why the thing with this, and I do like what the president did, which is not ask the permission of the central bank, because he understands that the central bank of his own country is his enemy. And why would you tell your plan to the enemy in advance? So I don't know who this guy is. I want to learn more about him. I didn't know that he didn't tell the central bank. I think that's fucking badass. I think that's very smart.
So to be specific, it's because the Central African Republic, they don't have their own central bank. It's a central bank that controls 6 African nations, right? So it's even worse. It's even worse because they don't get to control their monetary policy. It belongs to someone else. So it's even more insane. And they still want to be asked fucking permission, bro. I'm turning red because of how crazy that sounds.
You nailed it with the gaslighting, right? So it's like, okay, so I didn't know that they were part of the African franc. So who the fuck knows how that currency is even managed? And I believe, after reading some of Alex Gladstein's stuff about this specific topic, which I didn't know much about, it's all managed in France anyway, probably by some French bureaucrats. So you're like a Central African normie. What's easier to understand? Like the Bitcoin white paper and a bunch of articles that you're going to find online that are written by, I don't know, Gigi and all these kinds of guys, or like the workings of an international central banking system. Like obviously Bitcoin is much more transparent, and financial inclusion, because it's worked great in Africa so far. It's very inclusive, right? Okay, It's insulting, right? Like these people, like the hubris, and it's hard to tell if they believe they're bullshit because they're so isolated from the average person, or they're just nefarious. I think they actually starting to swallow their own shit at this point, because it's so obscene to say. I mean, I don't have enough empathy to imagine what it's like to say that kind of shit with a straight face, but I don't know.
Francis, honestly, we've been going back and forth on whether they're nefarious or whether they're just sniffing their own farts. We have absolutely no idea.